of Zugat, we are a data intelligence company helping organizations maximize their channel partnerships, which is very exciting space to be in today. And I'm here with the one and only Gilad Friedman. I waited a long time for this, Gilad.
And I waited a long time for this, and it's absolutely a great opportunity. Thank you for having me in this wonderful Google facility.
Thank you. Thank you, Google. Thank you, everyone. Thank God we are all here today. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, but I'm going to anyways give a little brief on who you are because you are the VP Global Channels at IONIX, which is one of the hottest cyber companies today, who are helping people deal with the overwhelm of alerts, which is probably like, you need an alert because of security, but you probably need an alert from the alerts these days. That's a whole nother subject. And before that, you were at Panorays, another incredible cybersecurity company, also happens to be from down the road here in Tel Aviv. And before that, you were at the one and only WalkMe.
Correct.
Which I had like 100 questions about, and I've managed to cut it down to less. But there's a lot to discuss. Before we get going, give a little brief on yourself because I probably didn't do that well enough. And you're a very interesting and exciting person in this space to have.
Thank you very much, Naomi. Well, what can I say? Again, my name is Gilad. We'll leave the age aside. I've been in high-tech all my life. My bachelor's degree actually is in computer science. So
Wow.
I started as a programmer.
Wow.
Sometimes I like to joke and say that I'm not as dumb as I look.
No comment.
But after a few years, I jumped over the fence into pre-sales.
Yeah.
And then in pre-sales, you start interacting a lot with customers. And I loved the interaction. But then I said, I want to be the front. And then I turned into a sales rep. And then sales, what happened was in the company that I was working at the time, was moving into a channel-only go-to-market model. So I started to specialize in partnerships and VARs, and it's been channels, almost always channels ever since. So I've been in channels for about 20 years now.
Wow.
More or less. Yeah.
The space has changed dramatically and continues to, but we're doing this today at an even more exciting time, especially coming from a cyber company. So if it's okay with you, what I thought was to ask a little bit about things from your experiences during your profession, and then to go a bit into the wider space. A lot of people today are asking, what is the need for channel partnerships when we're moving towards a marketplace first kind of buying system? Others are saying that maybe the channel only works for certain types of companies at certain types of phases. And we're going to challenge all of that today because I think channel partnerships is being made out to be a lot more complex than it needs to be. And it's about time that we took some of that off.
Well, that's perfect. I would comment, Naomi, to say there is no right or wrong answers in channel. If there's one thing I learned is it's a thousand shades of gray. And sometimes it's right for one company. Sometimes it would be wrong for another. I promise you, I'll give you my insights and my experience and what I believe could be
Amazing.
The right thing.
So let's go back to WalkMe because I think there you really were there at such an exceptional time. You grew the channel-driven revenue from something like 3 to 18% or something like that, and exciting. Tell us just a bit about that. What was it like being there? What did you focus on when you first started, and how did the organization enable you to take the channel on the journey that it did there?
What you will see many times comes up in channels is how to move from a tactical move into a strategic move with regards to channel. What does that mean in real life? In real life, many times when a startup starts to sell, you will go to customers, sell, hopefully successfully, but every once in a while, you'll end up with a customer who says, you can't sell to me directly. I'm not going to put you up on my vendors list. It's just too much time, too much hassle. go through one of my resellers. And then they have to go through an indirect model. And then suddenly you jump on to the next. Wait a second, if I'm forced to work with him, maybe he's already in touch with other customers in this domain, and maybe he can introduce me. And then it starts to be a very tactical move. And then you sit back and say, okay, wait a second, my product is at a maturity level that I can let other people touch it and sell it.
Yeah.
And I don't need to have R&D with me very closely. And then how do I make it more strategic? This is the point, more or less, where I entered WalkMe. We had an amazing visionary president by the name of Rafi Swery. And he said, look, if we increase our direct sales capability, then we have to increase sales, pre-sales, customer success. It's everything. It's immensely expensive, number one. And then, after a while, you stop being a software vendor. You become a services company.
Yep.
Valuations are totally different. The focus is totally different. So we had to start to build a strategic partnership program within WalkMe.
Wow. So I love that because you've told us a bit about the natural way of it happening. But for many companies, that first partnership that you described, it doesn't really come along like that. Or if it does, they don't know how to recognize it. So what happens for them? What happens for a company who the CEO and the founders, they've been direct salespeople. They've never worked with partnership teams before. They like to own the sales cycle. They've chosen a new VP sales. He comes on. They've hit a few million in revenue. How are they going to do that switch and to say, hey, let's share this with someone else. Let them sell the baby as well?
Again, I believe a lot of my responses here today would be strategic. As I just told you, I don't think that there is no partnership go-to-market model. You'll end up working with partners, even if it's tactically, you'll end up. There are 3 basic channel go-to-market models. Channel only, channel first, and channel 2. O, T-O-O.
Yeah.
Let me quickly run you through them.
Please.
Channel only means we are only selling through partners.
Best example for that? Microsoft?
Synomi.
Oh.
Synomi, a very small startup. Checkpoint on the other end of the spectrum. Microsoft sells channel only, but it exists in small startups as well, in scale-ups and so on. It takes a very visionary CEO and a leadership knowledge.
Right.
But it's all about how do you get easily to sell to your end customers. By the way, also with the channel only, there is a portion of the business that you will own in terms of selling, the strategic layer. Channel first means that usually there are 2 selling arms. There is a direct and there is an indirect. But even if it's a direct arm, the default would be to run it through a partner. Channel 2 means, okay, let the strong one win.
Nice
and let's
to have. The battlefield.
And I have yet, and I'm around 30 years in the business. I have yet to see a channel 2 model succeed strategically.
That's a big thing.
Of course. Again, you cannot do channels on the side. Let's see how it goes and it works strategically. I mean, here and there you're going to have successes probably, but not in a strategic manner.
So I love that. So how would you then, you come to a company, you meet their CFO, and he has never done this channel stuff, doesn't know what you're talking about. How would you then explain to him the case of how to invest in being channel first before he's seen the proven results and knows the ROI of that effort?
I would say when talking about a person that relates predominantly to numbers, when you scale up the company with direct resources, you're going to have a linear growth at best. The numbers talk, Naomi.
Yeah.
It's not just about hiring salespeople. What about all the ecosystem around it? Customer success, pre-sales, support, etc. It's an incredibly high expense. And remember, even if you have fair sales reps, you're going to have to pay them anyway, the base salary. With a partner, there's always this talk about commission. When do you pay a partner commission?
When he delivers.
Upon winning.
Yeah.
Not upon providing leads. The leads are part of the game. So if I win and I get money in the bank, I can then allow myself to give you a portion of it. So from an efficiency point of view, I think channels is also better.
Yeah.
And I say to the CFO, if we don't work with the partners, who's going to work with them? What do you think, Naomi?
Your competitor.
Thank you very much. So what do you prefer?
Absolutely. You talk about competitors and partners. One of the interesting things that we're doing now as a young company for very large enterprises is helping them understand the competitive landscape of their partner program. So companies have been, building these programs and deciding how it should work and deciding on their commission. And sometimes the partners feel like, you know what, you should have asked me because your competitor is offering me better resources, better support, better commission. So I'm going to sell their product instead. What do you think is happening in terms of that understanding of the partner's needs to stay competitive? Do you think that we're at a point where companies are actually accepting that you can't just write the rule book and expect it all to work?
You remember what I told you about the 150 shades of gray. First of all, it depends on your status in the market. If you're a startup or if you're Checkpoint, your leverage on partners is different to an extent.
Yeah.
But I still totally agree with you. And this is the job of people like myself, heading channels. We're kind of schizophrenic because it's our job to represent the company in the various channels, but it's as important to represent the various channels in the company and explain how things work or how things cannot work. You cannot, at scale, at a long scale of time also, dictate things to a partner, especially in the competitive landscape, because they care about their business. So when you build a channel program, it has to be attractive while keeping the interests and risks of your own company.
You mentioned basically their interest is the customer, right? So let's talk about the customer for a moment. And you said how sometimes a buying process, the customer will say it's got to go through a certain partner or, we've got the RFP or whatever it is, they'll dictate the rules. Do you think that companies are really understanding their customers' needs for those who are managed by partners? So the reason I ask this, again, I'm going to go into a use case that we're seeing every day, is sometimes companies tell us our customer success team lack data and visibility to know what the customer is experiencing because there's a partner looking after them and we just don't know what's going on there. Is that something you would resonate with or you think is happening for others?
Kind of extremely resonating. And I'll explain. Many times, one of my difficult jobs is to convince reps to ask in the very first discovery phase, is there anyone servicing you in this field? Because especially in cyber is a very difficult topic, very fragmented. You have dozens and dozens and dozens of vendors knocking on customers' doors saying, oh, we've just created the most revolutionary piece of software which changes the world, and so on. Many times, companies would outsource that to a trusted advisor and say, here's what we need from a business perspective. Go out, research, give me the top 3 that I need to evaluate. So I tell the reps going to our story, ask them if they're serviced by someone, because if they are, I'll find a way. Either I'm already connected or I can find the connection and say maybe influence, because if you get to that partner which has the customer's ear, I wouldn't say it's kind of smooth sailing from there on, but I would say it's a totally different engagement.
Absolutely, especially in terms of getting to the decision maker and shortening the sales cycle and all the things that salespeople go through. I'm going to be honest, I'm not a partnership person. I've never managed a partnership. I'm a salesperson. Like you, started in sales, but then as I sold more and bigger, I couldn't avoid this partnership thing. There is definitely, though, a big gap between sales teams and partnership teams still today in a lot of organizations. And for both to succeed, egos need to turn down and people need to work together. What do you think organizations can do to get their salespeople, including the partnership team, more asking those questions that you're mentioning, are they being serviced, or let us help you out on this sale? What is it that you think you can do to get these reps including you better?
So let's talk a little bit about how to have a good relationship with sales reps. So let me ask you, Naomi, as a sales rep, what did you care about most?
Money.
Quota, right?
Quota, yeah.
Quota.
I want to hit quota. I want to make.
So if I go into the sales room and I say, I want to be in charge of 25% of your pipeline. I want to provide 25%. Are you going to give me your attention? Yes or no?
Look, if you told me you were going to take one of my kids, I'd be less hesitant. There's a trust issue there. 25% of my quota to all of a sudden now say, I let you handle. It's a big thing. I totally get why I
I'm not saying handle. Look, there's only limited resources and various channels in which you get pipeline, right?
Yeah.
It's direct leads, BDRs, SDRs.
So tough right now.
Your own outbounding, your own network.
People are lazy, they don't want to do it. Let's talk really what's going on.
So I'm saying partners. And if they say, okay, I'm listening. And then I say, but before we go into there are rules of engagements. There are ground rules. There are do's and don'ts. And it's a bi-directional street. So if you want me, and I'm willing to work my butt off to give you 20, 25%, and again, it can be 50% of your pipeline through partners, you will also have to obey those rules. For example, never, ever steal an opportunity from a partner, no matter what. Unless you come to me, we work it out, either with or without the partner and so on. You have to give in order to get. I have yet to see partners that just give. And again, I'm not going to go through every one of those ground rules, and then once those rules are set, I work with the sales leadership in order to get their endorsement. So every once in a while, it's unavoidable that something will happen.
Yeah.
And we sort things out. And if someone needs to get a slap on their hand, no matter which side, they will. That's the way I found I could do things at scale. And I can get the sales team's ear. No. And the smart ones, Naomi, I'm telling you, the smart ones get it. They would rather lose 5-10 points and get a 100K deal. Because then they start developing a relationship, and it's not only the 100K deal or whatever the ASP is. It's about developing the relationship and trust with the partner. And then, hey, why don't you get, and so on. So I'll pause here. This I found very useful for me.
It's really interesting. To be honest, one of my moments where I decided I'm going to now go all in on this partnerships is I was selling to the UK and I had been changed my territory and I didn't have many partners where I was selling to. And the guy next to me, my friend, was selling to France. He had a couple of partners there. and he had these leads coming in. And he was working with him incredibly. And I remember sitting there and I kept asking him about it and asking his BDR about it. And I was seeing this amazing motion of just creating business and creating business value for customers. But when you're sitting in that frustrating place as a salesperson and the clock is ticking and you're further and further away from your quota, it's very hard to ask me, be patient. Give them a lead first. Work with them. So how can we also speed things up when it comes to partnerships? Because I get that we've got to give it time in the long run, but I also get that we need to have some ROI and we need to be moving and we need to be making things happening, and it can't be too sleepy.
You've mentioned the time. One of the most interesting, challenging topics in channels, especially when you're starting and you're building from scratch. I told you the number of years and 20 years in channels out of the 30-year career, more or less. I have yet to see anyone in channels beat the clock because it's a relationship and trust issue. Unless the only exception that I saw, not in companies that I worked with or worked in, is that you have an amazing brand that has an awareness. I would say Wiz today is sometimes in this category. Lately, in previous years, it was different companies where you have such huge awareness. You have partners knocking on your door. They already have a list of potential customers they know they want to sell into, and you're not. Otherwise, 99% of the cases, I would talk to the partner and the rep would say, let's do 1 + 1 + 1. I give you one, you give me one, and we go together to find the third one.
Sometimes people managing partnerships feel like they're just running out of partners. They need to find new ones. They need to find better ones. How would you suggest they go around this? Where would you tell them to look? Or, if you have someone now and he's saying, I need more partners in a certain territory, how do you tell them to go about it?
Okay. You have to figure out what your IPP is.
IPP, the ideal
partner profile. It's like there's various ways of doing it. First of all, you need to decide what are the categories by which you judge your IPP. It could be the company size, the industry they're in, the number of sales reps they have, whatnot. You decide what are the categories. But again, you have yourself, what's your sweet spot? And then part of figuring that out is also seeing what your ICP is and then do a reverse engineering. Who's servicing them?
Yeah.
And then I'll give you an example. You know what? From these days, in my work at IONIX today, I am looking for MSSPs, Managed Security Service Providers. Then, where do you find them? And it's specific profile and specific size. I have my IPP. So the old-fashioned way, I talk to all the sales reps who come from years of experience. Who have you worked with? Who are your top 10? I get that list. There's, we're in the Google facility. Old Mr. Google. Find lists and lists of Google, LinkedIn, MSSPs. There are also specialized companies. TCC, the channel company, if you know them as one. There's forums of channel that you can then dig in that have special events for MSSPs. So at first, you cast a very wide net, produce lists of potential hundreds, and then figure out how to do an outreach. It could be webinars, it could be emails, it could be... I find different ways more effective because people don't respond well to emails today, and you have to go, but there's a lot of groundwork to do, and you can always find more partners. always. It's just the effort that you put in it.
What do you think about marketplaces? Sometimes leadership are now saying to their partnership teams, we're not sure what's going to happen with our partners because as we move into more of a SaaS model, we're moving more and more towards the marketplace. Do we really need them?
I personally do not have good experience with marketplaces. I think it depends, as I always say, it depends on the product, depends on the market segment. For example, SMBs, the lower end of the market, there's a lot of good marketplaces where you can find good partners. And there's cloud marketplaces that you can find good places. For me, I have to be honest, I didn't find it that effective.
Something I want to ask you about is about the management of the partners.
Mm-hmm.
So in companies where they have larger partner profiles, they have a lot of people managing their different partners. A lot of that work is done very manually. Also like what you described right now. And sometimes they're using spreadsheets and each one does it differently. Do you think that companies should be trying to create more of a science into how they manage their partners rather than letting it all be, everyone has their relationships with their partners that they manage, and as long as they're putting things in the CRM, it's okay?
Marketing is a science. Sales is a science. Channels is a science. Period. I welcome anyone who listens to this podcast to challenge me. I welcome. The reason I'm saying it is because it needs to be managed with as much information systems to govern it. I don't believe there's enough today. And all the PRMs, with all due respect, and we do use a PRM, and I have used a PRM, I don't think they encompass the real the real robust relationship and interactions that you have with partners today. And I can give examples later if you want. And you have to track everything, and everything needs to go, I believe, into the CRM. You need to track it eventually because the same rules apply, which means the Pareto rule, 20% of your partners will probably provide 80% of your business, is true. How do you find them? How do you track? How do you know what's happening? You have to go with information systems, and anything that is done manually is bound to fail at scale and at time.
There are over 266 information systems doing different partnership and channel things today. But the reason we are growing and we're so excited about what we're building at Zugat is because we feel that they're just not giving teams what they need. And when we talk about information, I'm talking about data like the one you mentioned before on your new partners. Bring them to me. Don't make me look for them. The different segments, looking at different people, the different profile. That profile can change every day based on the stock market. Mm-hmm. Something happens in the world, you've got a different kind of partner in different place. So I totally agree with that and resonate. I keep saying last thing, but I hope now I'm going to start wrapping up. One of the most interesting things you've done is you've really done global channel. So we're sitting here in Tel Aviv. Where did you grow up? Were you born here?
Nope.
Where are you from?
I'm an Aussie.
You're an Aussie.
Melbourne.
Oh.
That's me. You can't hear it in the accent.
So
but
we're a lot clearer than I thought.
I'm part of the Commonwealth.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it exists anymore, but there you go. We have the same queen. We now have
the king.
Yeah, not the same queen, but there you go. Okay. So I think companies are missing something. I think that they're not understanding how this partnership and channel team is a huge part of their brand. Because you built this spider web of your partners, not only all over the industry and with all your customers, but all over the world. And I mean, you open offices in Japan for WalkMe.
Yep.
You've had teams all over. Tell us a little bit about that, because it's fascinating and it's something that a lot of channel people would love to get to do one day.
I'll give you some examples, because all the different geographies are different. The U.S., what designates the U.S. is, especially North America, or if I may even say U.S. and Canada, is very uniform. It's even the different states, and so it's the same culture. In Europe, it's not the United States of Europe. People in the U.S., forgive me for all those American listeners, sometimes tend to think about Europe as the United States of Europe, and it's not. But let me give you a channels example of what I mean. Today, in my focus, I use predominantly resellers, VARs, and MSSPs in the US, both regional and nationals. I don't use distribution right now. In EMEA, in Europe, I do use distribution because I do think that it helps in the structure, the political structure in which Europe is built. In Asia, and not only was I born in Australia, but as you noted, I did live in Japan for a while, and I supported APAC for years. It's even more diverse. And what was interesting in giving you the example, there's very ways of going into regions. In Japan, WalkMe decided that it's going to be a joint venture. Actually, the year before we even started with a joint venture, I was tasked by going to see if the Japanese market is mature enough. And it was just me and one local Japanese guy testing out. And within 1 year, we got two incredibly good partners. It was Accenture and Hitachi Solutions, and we got two customers. Then they understood, okay, Rafi understood there's potential there. And then it took a little bit, and we partnered up with JCC. So it was send Gilad over.
Yep.
The Japanese, our counterparts in the joint venture, they brought the managing director and go form a company, which was called WalkMe Japan. From nothing, nothing. It was me and the MD.
Wow.
And then, just as a fun fact, they said, "Can you relocate?" And at that time, my kids were in high school, so maybe that discloses my age a little bit. But anyway,
Yeah. Okay.
Then I said no, and for almost a year, I did 2 weeks in Tel Aviv and 2 weeks in Tokyo.
Wow.
Almost 1 year. The only reason why it was cut short was because of COVID.
Wow. You're working at IONIX, you're at Panorays, and before that you were at WalkMe. These are all incredible brands that have come out of what we call here, the world calls a startup nation.
Yep.
It's an exceptional place to be, especially if you're in tech and in cyber and all of this. It's also complex. We've had a crazy day today. I mean, it's hard.
Very emotional day, I would say.
The emotions and the roller coaster. Yep, L'chaim, there we go. You knew I was going to ask something about it. It's a lot.
I think what happens in our tiny country in a week doesn't happen in other regions in a year.
How have you learned to best handle your partnerships with foreign partners and companies during these kind of times?
First of all, with transparency and by delivering. You deliver. Israel delivers. We deliver no matter what. I believe that's part of our mentality. And when in interesting times, if we can call it like these, we deliver, then imagine in more peaceful times what we can do. Tenfold. So I actually grew the number of partners tremendously in the past year where I'm at IONIX. And I'm trying to think, there was not even one case where people said, too volatile, I don't think I'm going to sign up. It was a professional debate whether it's the right product and the right solution or the services that we can add to their portfolio. but it was never up to our resilience. Never.
It's amazing. On that point, I want to add something as a founder, CEO of a startup. I work a lot with investors and go to, the events, and you're hearing insights and you're learning from their different portfolio companies. Channel partnerships isn't something that many investors are interested in or know about. And maybe from your experience in IONIX, in Panorays, in WalkMe, you can help to explain why, even when you're working at the early stage of a startup, it is so important to help the founders create a base for the partnerships that the business is going to need. Tell me, just a thought that you would share with investors who are talking, go to market, go to market, go to market. Where does partnerships come in?
Very good question, by the way. So let me separate, if I may, Naomi, also to investors and to CEOs.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that the product has to be stable and mature to an extent before going indirect. A partner would never, ever jeopardize their brand for you. Ever. They've worked extremely hard to build their customer base. Therefore, if you go in and something happens because of your product and it reflects on them, there's probably not going to be a next opportunity with them. And information's going to spread like wildfire. But you remember a few minutes ago we talked about time. Rule of thumb, 18 to 24 months before CEOs and investors think that channels or partners could be relevant, then start. It will be an investment. We had our talks before and we say, especially in startups, the CEOs will go, where's the revenue? Where's the revenue? Where's the revenue? And so on. And there's always that conflict. Any channels person, a true channels person, would tell you that they have a list of experiences like this. I would say somewhere up to 18 months, it's going to be predominantly tactical relationships and revenue. It's not that there's not going to be any revenue, but a tactical revenue is hard to predict. They're going to get a target, but very hard to say if I'm going to meet it or not when I'm building the channel from scratch.
Yeah.
After 18, 24 months, if you've done your job correctly and things work out and the product is stable and, probably you're going to get into the channel machine phase where you have the components of the channel program already working, feeding top of funnel, processing it, and then hopefully creating more and more closed-won opportunities. Mm-hmm. And especially in the SaaS world, tell me one example where channels are not relevant. They're always relevant. They are around. It doesn't matter if you like it, you don't like it. They are there. If you utilize it correctly to your benefits, this is where the acceleration is going to come. Not by hiring 10 more sales reps. We talked about it in the beginning. That's not going to produce acceleration. And today, what do investors want? Two things: growth and efficiency. Growth you might get. All the 2019s, 2020, 2021, it was all about growth. 40% year on year. The market recruited, it
was strange.
Crazy, but the efficiency was crap. And then companies IPO'd, and what happened to the stock? It plummeted. Why did it plummet? Because the market says you're not worth that. So today, if you want to stay efficient, you need to think of a more efficient way. And tell me something more efficient than partners.
They're efficient if you know how to manage them.
Correct.
And how to measure your investment in them. They're inefficient if you don't have the data to do that. And so you're blind, basically, and you're running after the wrong partners or investing too much in them or, things like that. So I understand what you're saying, but I do think that there is still a gap that needs fixing in that efficiency.
You started to talk about, or we started to talk about information systems. I cannot state enough how important that is. Ask today, people like me, who are your top 5 partners? And it's okay, there's revenue, but there's opportunities, there's leads, there's activities, there's so much that you need to gather.
Do you know what I love about this conversation also? We haven't used the AI word once, but I have a theory that we shouldn't be. Because it's like if I asked you, do you use Wi-Fi to help you do partnerships? Well, yes, it comes in useful. Same with AI today. And that's one of the things where when you talk about the systems, in general, the systems for channel partnerships have been pretty bad and about 10 years behind every other team's systems. We're changing that because it's just not sufficient enough and they need a total makeover. So,
may I talk 1 minute about
please,
that?
Absolutely.
Today, information systems predominantly are around deal registrations. The basics. But partners touch many of our business units. They touch sales, of course, but they also touch pre-sales. And they need to be enabled. And they need to be trained. And they need to be certified. That goes also for post-sales. But when we talk about post-sales, they also participate in projects. Sometimes they do the projects by themselves, and we have zero visibility. But we're the vendor. We need to put the seal of approval, right? Because it's our product.
Yeah.
How do you track? How do you ensure the quality of the project is as if you'd done it direct? How do you measure that? How do you monitor it? And then, okay, let's talk about the basic operational stuff of finance and invoices. How many times were you sent as a sales rep to run after the customer and so on? Why wouldn't the partners want to have a view about all their upcoming invoices and what's the status and so on? And what kind of information do you want to share with them? What about marketing? Yeah, some of the PRM, they have, MDFs and some sugar-coated fluff, yeah, whatever. But there's so much. Again, we talked about true partnerships, right? Contributing. Yeah. If you want to have a true partnership program with real committed partners, there's a lot more that needs to be done in order to expose, to monitor, to track what it is that we're doing with them and dropping all the noise, which may take a lot of our time, and just focus on the right ones.
You mentioned so many great things there. I want to end this and I don't want to sell, but the first product that we released was helping gather feedback from partners. And we were working with big brands who we're all familiar with, and we were getting from hundreds of their partners feedback. And we were using AI in different ways to then translate that feedback so that they can actually, make actionable decisions and whatever from it. And we started bucketing them, and we started splitting them between sales and between marketing. And then as the team, the product guy and tech guy, we're saying, okay, we need to add also product because there's things about the product, missing integrations, things about competitor. Then we say, okay, we also need to mention support. We ended up having 7 buckets. I won't tell you how many we're at now, but the feedback from the partners were relevant to everyone in the organization.
Of course.
From the CFO when it comes to how he's giving us resources and commission structuring and things like that, to the actual product itself. And then if you're not following up about it, you need to be tracking things like they asked for the API. Did it help them sell the next quarter? Did they use it? Were their customers happy? How is this changing you? So there's so much around that companies haven't been looking at today. And that is why I really believe, and that's why we're here today, I really believe that we are at the most exciting time for channel partnerships. We're just taking off with them. Everything that you and others who have built this base of it, of how to do it, have been doing until now, Now is when everyone will be able to really see the money time in their partnerships if they listen and they follow these tips and these ways of doing it properly. Because, like you said, with efficiency and the need of growth, you can't avoid this whole function in the organization anymore.
I would say, Naomi, channel education, I think, should be also an academic project. When you have all these entrepreneurship programs today in universities, they talk about how companies and investors and money and finance. What about the basics of sales and channels? How to build a go-to-market strategy? Who taught you how to build the correct or the most efficient
When was the first time you ever sold something?
For me, I think it was that I remember high school.
High school, what did you sell?
Biscuits and things like this. I bought off the makolet, grocery, whatever, and I sold it to the guys.
So I used to sell, there are like these gum balls. They're like really big. It's like a chewing gum thing. You have to look and it's got all different colors in it. They're really bad for your teeth. And when I used to come on vacation to Israel, actually, I used to take them to London and in my locker at high school, and I made quite a good bit of money from it. It was good fun. But why I went here, because you spoke about education, and we'll end on this note.
Yes.
As parents, when it comes to all of these things, if you really want to get someone understanding the fun in sales and in channel and in business, you've got to start it young. And I remember during Corona, one day I'm like bored out my mind with my kids going crazy at home. It was like everyone in lockdown. Thought, okay, we're going to sell something. I told them we're making biscuits. You're going to sell the biscuit. My son was like 4. And I put him on this stand. And there was like one person an hour who would walk past because everyone was scared to go out because of the air. And he started making money. And then he took it another. It actually got to a phase where we recently moved him schools. There were complaints in the WhatsApp group of his class. Who is the kid who is ripping off our children with his high prices for the different treats he's selling them? And I said to him, you know, I'm so proud of you that you're not ripping them off. They're paying for it. It's supply and demand.
If he ever wants to go into indirect sales, let me know.
Well, look, this has been really fun. Thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you for having me, and thank you, Google, for this amazing facility.
Thank you. Great.